I think let's pull our questions together, and this is a good. So we're right on time. It's 2:30. So we have 30 minutes for a Q&A session. It can be more of a discussion, but um, perhaps someone from the. I mean, I know I have several questions, but perhaps anyone from other than the speakers. These are questions for now to everybody, and yeah. So maybe to start, I'll ask a question to Danny about. So you mentioned a little bit how to select if you were to select between Nextflow, and now you've seen also um,
Mhm.
Nextflow used with CodeOcean, and so how would you generally make the decision for any specific project, how to which tool to use between? And have you looked at other tools and
Yeah.
yeah, how would you make that decision
So my
if
my
someone was asking you?
yeah, my answer changes a lot, but currently I'm feeling like I value the simplicity and like the ease of setup that Nextflow gives you for at least developing your workflows. So I guess it depends on where your workflows are in terms of like the maturity model. If it's something where the inputs and outputs are not changing that much and you value the features that Flight gives you in terms of like scheduling and managing different users, like several users in your organization are running workflows and you want to be able to give them different permissions, then something more sophisticated like Flight is the way to go. But I think for a lot of these like experimental workflows where there's always new algorithms, new methods, new types of data, you want something that's like flexible enough to kind of deal with that. And it's worth, jumping into like learning the domain specific language of Nextflow because it's easy to set up and run those things. The other consideration is like what resources you have in terms of like cloud and stuff. Because like Nextflow, getting Nextflow on the cloud, I think it's a whole other deal that I didn't talk about. Um, yeah. Eric, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, I think that's right, and I'll say just off of the question in the chat as well. I kind of made this distinction. I said sort of more academic and more commercial, and I could elaborate on that a little bit because I think the terms aren't entirely clear. Um, and so a lot of these commercial ones are in fact free and open source software packages. They just originate from companies like Lyft or Airbnb that were designing these for large scale enterprise workflow management, and they release them often under open source consortiums. But they have a use case that's potentially very different than the individual scientist at their workstation. And things like Nextflow and SnakeMake are a better starting place for that kind of thing.
Yeah, as part of this, we evaluated a lot of workflow management systems, and
Mhm.
yes, there are two basic categories: the commercial and the academic ones. They differ in somewhat in style. I think the academic ones tend to be designed for larger jobs, whereas a lot of the commercial there are about 300 popular workflow management systems, and the commercial ones are more designed for quick jobs. Yeah, SnakeMake is another academic one, but there's for example, Prefect is a more of a commercial, but also a lot of them come as open source with the companies around them providing some sort of a service or an upgrade. SnakeMake, did anyone we evaluated SnakeMake as well? Did you guys look at SnakeMake?
I haven't looked at SnakeMake a lot personally. It was on our sort of trade study list. I'd have to go back. We made one of those big tables that everybody makes comparing these things. Um, Danny, off the top of your head, do you remember? I think that's
I,
a good
I, I
follow
I
up.
gave it a quick try, like one day, just ran similar workflows, really simple, like toy problems. The reason SnakeMake and Nextflow felt really similar to me, the reason we went for Nextflow is just because of the community support it has.
Yeah.
I like APO has a lot of bioinformatics people, and I've seen like other people in the neuroinformatics community start using Nextflow, which kind of leaned me to that direction,
Mhm.
where Nextflow just has like this wider community support.
And David, you're raising your hand.
Oh yeah, I was gonna basically echo the exact same thing Daniel said. Nextflow just seems like it's been around a little while longer, and there's a bunch of like workflows that exist already in Nextflow that we can just take and run with if we wanted to.
Yaroslav, you can run to the microphone. I see you running. You need to kick David off or somebody. Okay, there we go.
I managed. Um, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Just wanted to ask that question. So many containers are used, right? So you have now many of those in different workflows. I wonder if there is any centralized registries, and have you seen any specific interfaces to be defined? Like there is standardized interfaces. Let's say in neuroimaging, there is platform Flywheel. They have their gears. Then there is Brain Life. They have ABC apps, right? And then we have Bits apps, and they have little kind of interface. But we are starting to use more of boutique. So it's pretty much descriptor for an app, which parameters it expects, right? And then you could kind of harmonize all those containers so they have this predefined interface or ways to interrogate it. Like, what do you need? What is your input parameters, right? And then it makes it easier to plug it in. And I wonder in electrophysics data, and especially across all those different ways you do pipelines, is there any standardization on going to standardized interfaces across containers, provide centralized registries for what is available?
Who are you directing this question to?
The glorious panel of presenters. I don't know.
Maybe I'll quickly address this. So in DataJoule, we handle things a bit differently. It's more data centric than, and so we can then like workflow centric. So we don't. So in this way, it's a slightly different way to think about it. But so we are focusing on creating these elements which can come associated with the environment and container preset with
Exactly.
everything.
But where is that container comes from, right? So maybe it is a container for which you provide interface, which would be elements, right? The problem is that everybody generates containers.
Yeah.
Who will archive them, right? Docker kicks them out, right? And then try to reproduce study from before if nobody contains that container. If we minimize number of containers, let's say in your imaging, we have well accepted and known apps like fMRI Prep. We have archive of those, right? So later on, we could come and say, okay, it's fMRI Prep. Here we go. You just take it, right? If everybody creates their own containers, we have explosion, and then we have, they all evaporate. So that's one of the aspects why centralization would have been good. Interface is yet another layer on top of it. Let's put it this way.
I agree. Anyone? All right. Any other questions?
I think David, are you
Oh,
talking?
Dave is trying to speak, but let me move.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay. I think maybe one point to make is something about the stability of the data and the stability of the pipelines, right? So the methods themselves are changing very, very rapidly nowadays for spike sorting or calcium imaging, right? And then the data themselves are being improved rather constantly. Like the acquisition systems are changing relatively quickly. So not to say it's impossible, but I think if those things slow down, then centralization makes sense. If it's possible for everybody to use the same acquisition system and the same protocols for collecting data, then the one pipeline and like that works. But I don't feel like that's where we live right now. It's probably most important that it's very easy for people to take the work of others and transparently run it themselves and evaluate it.
And so I'll kind of plus one your comment there, David, with examples from the electron microscopy community. And so we've had these big projects like Micron's kind of happening over the past maybe decade now, and we're getting to the point where now they are having versioned releases that use tools and are starting to have some standard interfaces. And so I think it's sort of reaching the point where it starts to make sense, and I think it's something that BossDB is interested in is sort of serving as a potential tool registry of some form, at least for that sub community, right? and it's maybe just getting to that point where things are stabilizing, and you'd want to rerun the thing that was run on, say, microns, for instance.
Would it be? I'm reading maybe minds of somebody, but did anybody say the best time point is now? Right, the best time is now. I think that we are about. It's a good time to start any time.
Yeah, definitely.
What would you recommend for labs? Like, what would be, because we saw small ones, there is even smaller workflows, right? People create their own custom workflows, like nobody would. That's why we have already, how many, Dmitry mentioned? There is like 300 of them, right? You've mentioned already at least 3, right? So which one people should use? And I thought that, let's say, DataJoint would have its own workflow manager, but you use it efficiently within other workflows, right? So it's like, what would be the easy to cook recipe for new labs at the level 2-ish, right, where they try to repeat stuff?
Yeah, and I want to pose this question. So when we talk here, we all know workflow management. To most labs, most labs are at level 1, level 2, they don't even realize the need for workflow management. They actually, there's a kind of aversion. This is so complex and so in a way, before they realize that they don't even, nobody's asking for workflow management at this level. They like to see the data. They like to manually process so they can. So if we go to, like, for example, a Suite 2P workshop or a timeline workshop. So in January we went there, and there they insist on like seeing the result of each. So manually executing, curating. So I think the question gets to this panel, to the, we're primarily we're talking at level 4. So David, your team is level 4, level 5, kind of that, where scalability, automation, collaborative environments, team flow are focused. To most labs that they're right now they're with NIH, and the NIH, where the NIH for typical single PI labs, the focus is to go from level 2 to level 3 to at least adopt standards for just executing, not automating, but just keeping track of the data formats and the code that is used to apply them, but not yet to orchestrate. And so that the way we approach DataJoint, we publicize. We suggest multiple ways to adopt different workflow management systems. But DataJoint itself focuses on just defining the pipeline and all the transformation and not necessarily executing them. That there are many options to execute and orchestrate the computations. So we will provide one that's fully hosted and operated by our team, because these are very, very technically involved, but also create several open source solutions like this, like Flight combination, Nextflow combination. So no specific recommendation. There are just too many approaches. Yeah.
I would say, though, that I think you made a great point, and a very specific one is, if you have not yet started doing version control and environment management, if your code is not being captured in Git, and you're thinking through reproducible Conda environments or containers, that sort of thing, like, it's too far to design a workflow management solution.
Yeah. So this is partial. And by the way, we're actively. So don't cite this yet. We're we're within days, I would say, of publishing this as a preprint. But defining this workflow or this maturity model helps identify. If you're at level 1, going to the cloud will not help you. It will cost you more, and you really need to follow some steps like adopting a managed process before, and defining. Adopting tools that are well validated by the community and that are well so in that sequence. So to most labs, like if they're at level 2, they're not even it's not even in their thinking to adopt some sort of a scalable workflow management system.
Maybe I'll jump in quickly. Part of the reason that I put CodeOcean into the talk and onto my organization is because it's really designed for a relatively low technical skill user. So things like version control and environment management, they just sort of happen, and you can do more complicated things, but you can't not use the platform. And you can't use the platform and avoid version control and avoid environment management. Like, it just happens, and it's relatively straightforward. So that's one thing I like about it. So onboarding is very easy, and for small labs, like, not a lot of training necessary. That being said, if going to cloud is a barrier or whatever, maybe the choice for workflow management solutions depends a little bit on the tools your team knows. So, for example, you asked, like, why Nextflow instead of SnakeMake? Like, maybe one of the good reasons is SnakeMake is got a Python API, and your folks know Python, right? So you don't have to learn some groovy like language like Nextflow. You can just keep living in Python, and that's fine, right? The other thing related to like the different kinds of workflow managers, Prefect and Flight, they're like, you just like decorate functions in Python and whoosh, magic happens. But I find that that's a poor match to the style of workflows that I'm familiar with in neuroinformatics, right? So I got very excited about these for a period of time, and now I've sort of pivoted back. It's these like well-defined steps that communicate with each other via the file system, and I like those, and I think they're very easy for people to understand, right? This is a thing that I ran, it generates some files. This is another thing I run, and it's going to take those other files as input. That's really easy for people to learn, and so that puts you in the space of Nextflow and SnakeMake again.
I don't want to steal the show, but one more question. You mentioned concerns or aspects such as, okay, everything isn't fluid, right? So we have lots of tools, lots of data. Cool. We also have lots of subfields, which makes it even better, right? So there's different workflows, and that seems like, oh, that's a problem. But then Dimitri's first slides in his presentation, they were about specific steps, which are really typical for everybody who is doing this research, and then tools associated with it. And what happened in neuroimaging, that we have now identified workflows got modular. So we have one workflow, or step, which is called BIT app, which is called fMRI prep, which is we will do fMRI pre-processing, right? And that involves shitloads of steps, right, which are organized in the workflow, but it's internal, right? So now we have a module which comes even with Workflow Manager, NiPipe, right, for better or for worse, which internally organizes all this pre-processing. And then we need to take those big pieces now and plug them into yet another workflow manager. I wonder if anything like that could be done in those other subfields, or is it worth doing in other subfields of neuroscience, where it could be, okay, this is pre-processing for microscopy, or two-phone microscopy, and this is typical stages you do. You have them as parameters for your workflow, but then you have this pre-cooked cookbook, right? So let's say it's a table, one of the tables in Dimitri's presentation, right, which would do all those steps in most efficient workflow management kind of fashion, but within, and I plug it in. And then that would be your standard blog, which we can archive and contain for quite a while.
Yeah, I think that's very similar to the first question you asked about standardization and centralization.
It all comes around.
So I think the critical. I'll just repeat myself. The critical thing is that those processing steps, they're tightly coupled to the data in the acquisition system, and to the extent that that's true in the field, then we'll have a problem. Like if we stopped building custom microscopes, right, and it was all just a handful, like a monopoly, like one company produced all of the 2-photon systems in the world, and everybody bought from them, then you could do such a thing, right? You could very easily control the type of data that was collected, and then tightly couple the processing to that data. But that's not quite where we are right now. So it feels just like a field maturity thing, where it's moving too fast, I think, to completely standardize. But I do like the idea of people putting their best foot forward, right? Saying, like, I'm at the Allen Institute. We've collected, 100,000 hours of NeuralPixels. That's not something we've done, but we will at some point, right? And this works on all of them. So maybe come talk to us, not just about how we ran spike sorting, but also about how we set up our NeuralPixels rigs.
But standardization is there, right? We have already OMESR, we have MWB,
That's file format standardization, but it's not data standardization.
Okay, you mean like schema? How OMESR imposes the schema within the right?
I'm also talking about hardware, like the acquisition systems themselves.
Those don't have to be standardized as long as we can transform them and harmonize them.
Yeah, but the spike sorter won't work, right? If the signal to noise doesn't match what the spike sorter anticipates, or maybe
sure, but that's yet another aspect.
But that's what you need to have, like one processing step that works for everybody's data.
Or you try multiple and see which one works for this data in hand. Actually, that's what fMRI prep does to some degree. It's like for nonlinear transformation, it's like, oh, let's try this, let's try that. Okay, this one works best. Let's go with this one. So it incorporates this kind of pretty much what lab would do manually to arrive at their optimal workflow, but you can kind of encode that knowledge in an app. So
that's super interesting. I think it also requires us to know what correct right answer is, right? Like, and maybe that's a good first step, right? For NeuralPixels or calcium imaging, like, how do we know that we're actually extracting the neurology? That's a good question.
So yeah, Yaroslav, if I can mention, I actually argue for decoupling some of the processing. So right now, things like Sweet2P and Kaiman, for example, they combine multiple steps like motion correction, cell segmentation, and deconvolution into a single package. That's very difficult to decompose. And sometimes, people say, "Oh, I like the motion correction from one, and I like the segmentation from the other." And right now, they're not designed for that. If anything, we're asking to separate steps and put them together and use and instead of designing these monoliths that people currently design, separate them and use more of a standard pipeline approach for handling the data I/O and data transfers, and only focus and not couple GUIs and input output and algorithms into a single application, but separate them.
Well, as long as single application comes with those modules available independently, right?
That's
the same happens in your imaging. FSL, it comes with lots of tools and then the GUI, right? So we could take necessary pieces, and it comes with gazillion of command line interfaces, right? And that's what fMRI prep does. It takes piece from here, piece from there, and creates alternative workflow, right? So as long as those monoliths come in modular kind of decomposed fashion, right, then we're all okay to create our own monolith from them.
Yep.
Yeah, so I agree. If what you're asking, then what you're asking for is just format standardization, right? If everything communicates through a standard API, then we can mix and match like that. I heard you asking for like one thing to rule them all, which is not the same as a very standardized way to swap in and out components.
Well, one language to rule them all.
Fair enough.
But for different things, right?
Yes. Yeah. And to be clear, in our calcium imaging pipeline, we're strongly considering using Sweet2P for motion correction and Kaiman for segmentation right now. So just in line with what you said.
We're 5 minutes away from our time. If there are no more questions, I would like to thank everyone. Let's give another minute if anyone still has a question. David, you have your hand raised. Is that?
That's a zombie hand. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
This session will be also recorded, right? Because I just saw an announcement that recorded sessions from yesterday are available. So
yeah, probably yes.
I believe so.
Thank you so much. So as we, the challenge for us is what we think very much is how to transfer this knowledge now and disseminate it to smaller labs. Right now, these types of these types of concerns are primarily in larger collaboratives. So let's think about it. So the publication we're working on maturity of operations. This is something we'd like to attract more attention, and actually, if people want to contribute, we invite additional contributors. So please let us know. Anything else from the speakers or anyone else before we close? All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Mm-hmm.